You know that moment when you check your bank account and see your balance sitting exactly where it should be? Bills scheduled, transactions cleared, everything processing normally. There's something deeply reassuring about financial infrastructure that just works. But modern banking has a fatal flaw almost nobody understands. When the system cracks, you don't get the gradual collapse your brain expects from Depression-era photos. No slowly forming lines. No days to weigh options. Digital speed compressed crisis timelines to 72 hours from first warning to complete lockout. If you want the mechanics of modern bank collapse instead of outdated assumptions, hit subscribe and thumbs up if this makes you rethink banking security. When you think about banking collapses, what comes to mind? Probably those Depression-era photos, desperate crowds around the block, people camping outside banks overnight, tellers handing cash through barred windows until vaults run dry. Those images define what bank collapse looks like in our collective memory. That's not how it works anymore. Those Depression-era runs took days or weeks to develop. News traveled slowly through church gossip and neighbor conversations. Banks could close Friday afternoon and reopen Monday with some order restored. Physical limitations needing to show up in person, wait in line, receive actual paper currency created natural speed limits on panic. Modern banking exists almost entirely digitally, accessible 24/7 from anywhere. You can move $50,000 at 2 a.m. Sunday without leaving bed. Millions of people can attempt simultaneous withdrawals the moment they sense trouble. Social media amplifies every rumor to millions within minutes. This speed changes everything. Digital age bank runs don't take weeks or days. They take hours. From first credible warning to systemic lockout, you're looking at 72 hours maximum. Most people still operate on that Depression-era mental model, thinking they'll see crisis coming, with time to react carefully. They're wrong, and that mistake costs them everything. There are invisible thresholds separating those who protect themselves from those who lose access to their savings. The 72-hour window is the modern equivalent of getting to the bank before it closes. Miss that window, and you're locked out for months while capital controls and emergency regulations sort themselves out. Most people have no idea this threshold exists. They check their app daily, see their balance unchanged, assume stability equals security. But digital banking stability evaporates faster than morning fog. One moment, everything looks fine. 72 hours later, you can't access your money. This isn't about trusting banks or believing in institutions. This is understanding that game rules fundamentally changed, and most people still play by old rules. Think about what happens when a dam develops a crack. At first, just a thin line, barely visible, maybe a trickle seeping through. Engineers discuss whether it needs immediate attention or can wait. People downstream continue normal lives, completely unaware anything changed. But structural failures work like this. That crack allows water pressure to erode surrounding concrete. The crack widens, increasing water flow, accelerating erosion, widening the crack further. For a while, this happens slowly enough to feel manageable. Then suddenly, catastrophically, the entire structure gives way. The transition from small problem we can monitor to total collapse happens faster than anyone downstream can react. Digital age banking systems follow this exact pattern. The first withdrawals aren't a crisis, just normal operations. But when word spreads, something might be wrong, more people withdraw. Each withdrawal makes others nervous. Social media shows ATM lines. News mentions liquidity concerns. Suddenly, thousands try moving money simultaneously, creating exactly the crisis everyone feared. This is the avalanche problem, and humans are terrible at recognizing it until too late. Our brains evolved for linear threats, a predator at constant speed, a storm moving predictably. We can see those coming and decide rationally when to act. But exponential threats like bank runs don't work linearly. They accelerate. By the time the threat looks serious enough to warrant action, you're already buried. Here's what makes this dangerous in banking. Your brain doesn't just struggle with exponential math. It actively works against you once panic sets in. In survival mode, mental bandwidth gets consumed by immediate threats. You can't think strategically, weigh options carefully, or consider consequences. You're just reacting, following crowds, doing whatever reduces immediate anxiety. This is why people make catastrophic decisions during crises. Not because they're stupid, but because their brain shifted into threat response mode. It's like trying to plan retirement while someone's punching you. Your brain simply cannot perform both functions simultaneously. But there's preparedness mode, where strategic thinking happens before crisis hits. When you're not in immediate danger, your brain processes information rationally. You can map scenarios, create decision trees, pre-commit to actions based on trigger conditions. Then when crisis arrives and everyone else's brain shuts down into reactive panic, you're just executing a checklist you already created. The difference isn't intelligence or personality. The prepared person isn't necessarily smarter or calmer by nature. They've just done cognitive work ahead of time when their brain was capable of clear thinking. Once the dam cracks and water pours through, it's too late to develop strategy. You're either executing a plan you made earlier or drowning alongside everyone who thought they'd figure it out when the time came. In March 2013, Cyprus banks announced a temporary closure Thursday evening. Officials assured everyone this was precautionary while they worked out technical details with European regulators. Banks would reopen Monday, and everything would be fine. Depositors who heard this Thursday night had a choice: trust official reassurances and wait, or act immediately assuming temporary meant something very different. People who acted Thursday night and Friday morning withdrew maximum cash from ATMs before system lockdown. People who waited until Monday discovered temporary meant banks reopening with severe capital controls. They could access only 30% of their deposits. The other 70% was locked away, converted to bank equity, or simply vanished, depending on which institution held their money. 72 hours from first warning to total lockout. Greece followed nearly identical patterns in 2015. Saturday evening, the government announced banks would close Monday with capital controls implemented. Greeks who moved money out that weekend or withdrew maximum cash before the announcement had dramatically different outcomes than those who waited. When banks reopened, citizens faced €60 daily withdrawal limits, not per transaction total for the entire day. Try running a business or feeding a family on €60 daily when you've got hundreds of thousands sitting in accounts you can't touch. Those controls lasted months. Some restrictions stayed in place for years. People who acted during that 48-hour window preserved financial flexibility. Everyone else got locked into a system where their money technically existed but was functionally inaccessible. Lebanon's collapse from 2019 onward showed the same pattern even more severely. Initial warnings came October 2019, banks limiting withdrawals, currency exchange becoming difficult, crisis rumors circulating. People who moved money out of Lebanese banks in those first weeks preserved their wealth. Those who waited, trusting the situation would stabilize or that deposits were safe in respectable institutions, watched helplessly as informal capital controls destroyed 90% or more of their savings' real value. Here's the pattern that should concern you. These collapses happened on weekends or holiday periods. Cyprus announced Thursday evening before a long weekend. Greece announced Saturday before Monday closures. This timing isn't coincidental, it's strategic. Governments and regulators know that limiting reaction windows minimizes panic and gives them maximum control. Friday evening announcements mean you've got Saturday and Sunday before Monday lockdowns take effect. Most people spend weekends relaxing, not monitoring financial news or checking banking stability indicators. By the time they hear what happened and start thinking about whether to act, it's already Monday morning and new restrictions are in force. The window closed while they were deciding whether the threat was real. And here's what makes this timeline more dangerous. People who acted early in Cyprus, Greece, and Lebanon all looked paranoid for the first 12 to 24 hours. Friday, they were the weird ones pulling cash based on rumors. By Monday, they were the only ones with actual access to their money. This isn't about whether it can happen. We've watched this playbook execute 3 times in the last decade in supposedly stable nations with modern banking systems. Let's say it's Friday at 6 p.m. and you see first credible warning signs your banking system might be in trouble. Maybe a news alert about liquidity concerns. Maybe leaked documents suggesting problems are worse than publicly acknowledged. Maybe just a pattern of signals that, taken together, suggest something's seriously wrong. You have a decision to make, and timing will determine whether you protect yourself or lose access to everything. Here's what actually happens during those 72 hours. Hours 0 to 8, Friday evening into Saturday morning. This is the golden window. Banks still open or opening Saturday. ATMs fully stocked because it's normal Friday. Online banking functions normally. Stores have full inventory. Most importantly, you're not competing with anyone. The vast majority haven't heard the news, don't believe it's serious, or are waiting to see what happens. You can withdraw $5,000 to $10,000 from multiple ATMs without hitting unusual limits. You can initiate online transfers between institutions, and those transactions process normally because systems aren't overwhelmed. You can buy several weeks of essential supplies without anyone thinking it's strange. Everything works exactly as normal because the cascade hasn't started yet. The person acting in this window secures everything they need with maybe 2 to 3 hours of effort. It's almost boring how smoothly it goes. Hour 8 to 24 Saturday late morning through Sunday morning. Now things get complicated. News has spread on social media. More people are aware something might be wrong. ATMs develop lines. Some machines run out of cash and don't get refilled because it's the weekend. Banks that open Saturday see elevated traffic and may quietly implement unofficial withdrawal limits. Online banking starts slowing as transaction volume increases. Transfers that normally process instantly now take minutes or show pending. Some international transfers get flagged for review. Grocery stores see increased traffic in certain categories. The informed subset of the population is moving. The person acting during this window can still secure significant resources. But it requires more effort, more time, more locations. Instead of one ATM stop, you're trying 3 or 4 to cobble together needed cash. Instead of instant transfers, you're monitoring pending transactions, wondering if they'll complete. Maybe you secure 40% to 50% of what the hour 0 person got with the same effort. Hour 24 to 48 Sunday into Monday morning. The window starts slamming shut. Banks closed for the weekend. Most ATMs empty or with drastically reduced limits. The ones with cash have significant lines. Online banking either completely overwhelmed or intentionally throttled. Transfers initiated Sunday afternoon may never process. Grocery stores experience genuine runs. Not empty shelves yet, but picked over inventory with obvious gaps. Gas stations see lines. Visible crisis signs are now apparent enough that even skeptics start taking action. The person acting during this window operates in damage control. They're not securing what they want, they're grabbing whatever remains accessible. Maybe $200 from one working ATM instead of the $5,000 they needed. Maybe whatever food is left instead of balanced supplies. Online transfers sit pending. Hour 48 to 72 Monday morning when banks technically reopen. Total lockout. Government announces temporary capital controls. Banks reopen with strict withdrawal limits, maybe $100 per day. Online banking frozen or limited to tiny transactions. International transfers blocked. The person who waited until Monday discovers action is no longer possible. They're stuck with whatever cash was in their wallet Friday, whatever food in their pantry, whatever supplies on hand. Here's the math. The hour 0 person secured 15 to 20 times more resources with less effort than the hour 48 person. Same crisis, same actions attempted. The only variable was timing. Now here's the part that might sound like self-help nonsense, but it's the most practical thing in this entire video. When you internalize the 72-hour reality, you don't just gain information, you fundamentally rewire how you see financial crises. This psychological shift is worth more than any tactical advice because it transforms you from someone who reacts to someone who executes. Before you understand this threshold, you're reactive. You wait for confirmation, for official announcements, for consensus that something is wrong. You scroll social media looking for what others think you should do. You call friends to discuss whether rumors are credible. You're hoping someone with authority will tell you definitively whether to be concerned. After you understand this threshold, you become someone who acts on incomplete information. You see warning signs, and you move, not because you're certain disaster is imminent, but because you understand waiting for certainty means waiting until the window closed. You're comfortable being early, comfortable looking paranoid for 24 hours, if it means being protected long term. You've mentally rehearsed the scenario enough that when real warning signs appear, you're not frozen by decision paralysis, you're executing a plan you already made. This isn't about becoming some paranoid prepper living in constant fear. It's about building psychological capability to act decisively under pressure without needing social permission or official validation. And that's a skill extending far beyond banking crises. It's the same mindset that lets you leave toxic jobs before having the next one lined up, end relationships that aren't working. Make hard decisions when everyone around you is paralyzed by uncertainty. Think about what it takes to act at hour 0 when everyone else is waiting until Monday. You had to trust your pattern recognition over official reassurances. You had to accept social discomfort of being the person withdrawing cash while neighbors post weekend brunch photos. You had to delay gratification, keeping that cash reserve untouched for months or years until actual crisis validates your preparation. That's fundamental identity shift. You've become the type of person who controls their financial destiny instead of hoping institutions will protect them. You've demonstrated to yourself that you can override social programming and act when it counts. And once you've proven that to yourself once, it changes every subsequent crisis you face. Before you hit this psychological threshold, every financial news story creates anxiety. Bank merger announced? Worry. Regulatory investigation reported? Worry. Liquidity concerns mentioned? Panic. You're in constant low-grade fear because you know you're not prepared and you're not sure you'd recognize warning signs if real crisis started. After you hit this threshold, those same news stories become data points in an assessment framework. You're not anxious because you have a plan. You know what indicators matter. You know what actions you'd take at hour 0, hour 12, hour 24. You've already decided where your red lines are. So instead of scrolling financial news with rising dread, you're calmly evaluating whether current conditions meet your trigger criteria. This is exactly like saving your first $20,000. The actual dollars matter, but what matters more is proving to yourself you can exercise discipline over extended periods, that you can delay gratification when necessary, that you're capable of sustained strategic behavior instead of reactive survival. Once you're operating in preparedness mode instead of survival mode, you start seeing opportunities that were always there but you couldn't access before. That banking panic destroying unprepared people? If you've got cash reserves and calm strategic thinking, you might be buying assets at fire sale prices. That moment when everyone else tries withdrawing funds, you're the person with liquidity to capitalize on chaos. You become someone who doesn't just survive crises, you navigate them successfully because you did the cognitive work beforehand when your brain was capable of strategic thinking. So what does preparedness mode actually look like when warning signs appear? Here's the specific playbook for each 24-hour window. Hour 0 to 24 Friday evening through Saturday. This is your execution window. The moment you see credible warning signs, you move. First priority, cash. Visit multiple ATMs and withdraw maximum allowed from each, aiming for $5,000 to $10,000 depending on your situation. Don't empty your account at one location. Spread across multiple machines to avoid triggering limits. Second, move funds between institutions. If everything is concentrated in one bank, initiate transfers to spread risk across 2 or 3 institutions, ideally including one outside your country if possible. These transfers need to start Friday evening or Saturday morning while systems still process normally. Third, buy 2 to 4 weeks of essential supplies, not luxury items, essentials. Shelf-stable food your family actually eats, prescription medications you can fill early, basic medical supplies. Water if your area's supply depends on electric pumps. Fill vehicle gas tanks completely. The goal isn't surviving apocalypse, it's weathering a 2 to 8 week period of banking restrictions without depending on daily ATM access. Fourth, secure important documents, passports, birth certificates, property deeds, insurance policies, legal documents you might need if normal systems are disrupted. Put them somewhere safe and accessible. Fifth, inform trusted family members without creating panic. Not your entire social network, just people you'd want to help who can keep actions quiet. The information advantage you have is valuable precisely because most people don't have it yet. Total time investment for hour 0 to 24 actions? Maybe 3 to 4 hours spread across Friday evening and Saturday. Everything works smoothly because you're not competing with crowds. Hour 24 to 48 Sunday into Monday morning. If you didn't act earlier, options are more limited but not hopeless. Focus on cash withdrawal, even if limits are starting to appear. Hit multiple ATMs, even if you're only getting $200 or $300 from each. For supplies, avoid obvious locations. Big chain grocery stores near residential areas will already see elevated traffic. Try smaller stores, ethnic grocers, restaurant supply stores, or stores in commercial districts that primarily serve businesses during the week. You're working around the crowd now instead of ahead of it. Online banking actions are risky at this point. Transfers initiated Sunday afternoon may process, or they may freeze Monday morning when capital controls hit. If transfers are critical, try them, but don't assume they'll complete. Hour 48 to 72 Monday morning. This is damage control mode. Banks reopen with restrictions already in place. You can't execute optimal playbook anymore, you're working with whatever access remains. Get to an ATM and withdraw your daily limit, whatever that is. It won't be enough, but it's better than nothing. Don't waste time standing in bank branch lines unless you absolutely need something requiring in-person service. Focus on immediate necessities with whatever cash you secured. If you have $500, spend it on a week's worth of food and critical supplies, not things you hope you'll need. Establish your communication network now if you haven't already. In restricted banking environments, informal networks become crucial. Neighbors, friends, local businesses operating on cash, these connections matter more when formal systems are locked down. Here's what makes this playbook powerful. The hour 0 to 24 checklist takes minimal effort and secures maximum resources. You're not panicking, not rushing, just methodically executing. The hour 48 to 72 checklist requires maximum effort for minimal results. This is walking away money for banking collapses. You have leverage because you acted early. You have options because you're not desperate. You can think strategically about the next phase while everyone else is still trying to solve immediate survival problems. Here's where most people mess this up, and I see it in every crisis. They understand the 72-hour timeline, they've mentally prepared, they even start executing, and then they make panic decisions that destroy the very position they're trying to protect. Fatal mistake number 1, panic withdrawing everything and keeping it somewhere unsafe. Someone hears warnings, withdraws $15,000, and stuffs it in a desk drawer. Then it gets stolen, lost in a fire, or simply misplaced during the stress. Cash is king during collapses, but only if you still have it when crisis resolves. The right move is withdrawing strategic amounts enough to cover 2 to 4 weeks of expenses and securing it properly. A fireproof safe, multiple smaller caches in different secure locations, not all in one place, not all on your person. Fatal mistake number 2, telling everyone about your preparations. Someone withdraws $10,000, buys supplies, feels proud, and posts about it on social media or tells half their neighborhood. Now everyone knows you have resources when resources are scarce. During the 2001 Argentine crisis, people known to have cash became theft victims, sometimes violently. Your advantage only works if others don't know about it. The right move is quiet execution. Tell immediate family who need to coordinate. Don't broadcast to friends, co-workers, neighbors, or social media. Fatal mistake number 3. Panic buying the wrong supplies. Someone decides to prepare and spends $2,000 on freeze-dried food with 25-year shelf life, 50 cases of toilet paper, tactical gear. Meanwhile, they forgot to refill critical prescriptions, they're out of food their family actually eats, and they have zero cash because they spent it all on bunker mentality purchases. The goal isn't surviving apocalypse. The goal is weathering 2 to 8 weeks of banking restrictions. Buy food your family actually eats. Fill prescriptions you need. Get basic medical supplies. Boring, practical stuff. Fatal mistake number 4. Making terrible financial decisions in crisis mode. Someone hears about collapse and immediately buys $5,000 worth of gold at peak crisis prices from some dealer, marking it up 30% because they know people are panicking. Or they pull all money out of the stock market at absolute bottom and lock in massive losses. These aren't strategic moves. These are panic moves dressed up as preparation. The right move is protecting liquidity, cash, diversified holdings across institutions, essential supplies, not making dramatic one-way bets during highest stress moments. Fatal mistake number 5. Burning bridges with institutions by acting hostile. Someone shows up at their bank Monday morning, angry about capital controls, starts yelling at tellers who didn't make policy decisions. Now the bank has flagged their account, they've created unnecessary problems, and they've destroyed any goodwill that might help them navigate restrictions. The tellers aren't your enemy. They're implementing policies handed down from regulators. Being professional preserves options. Maybe you negotiate slightly higher withdrawal limits through calm conversation. Strategic preparation includes maintaining relationships, not destroying them. Here's the opportunity cost that should haunt you. You have $5,000 for crisis preparation. Person A spends it on panic gold purchases at 30% over spot. Telling everyone on social media. Person B spends $500 on 4 weeks of practical supplies and keeps $4,500 in diversified cash and accounts. When crisis hits, Person A has overpriced gold they can't easily liquidate for daily expenses, zero liquidity, and everyone knows they have resources. Person B has supplies, multiple forms of accessible money, and nobody's targeting them. The difference isn't just money. It's that Person A destroyed their strategic position through panic moves that felt decisive but were actually reactive. Person B maintained flexibility, liquidity, and security by thinking strategically instead of doing something dramatic to feel in control. Understanding the 72-hour timeline isn't enough. You also need to understand how not to blow your advantage once you have it. Look, having a 72-hour banking collapse plan isn't about becoming some paranoid prepper living in constant fear. It's about understanding that modern banking systems have structural vulnerabilities created by digital speed, and having a simple plan for realistic disruption changes your entire relationship with financial risk. Most people think preparation equals anxiety. They imagine paying attention to banking stability indicators means living in constant dread, seeing threats everywhere. But here's what actually happens. It's the exact opposite. People who aren't prepared are the ones living with constant low-grade financial anxiety. Every banking news story triggers worry because they know they're vulnerable and aren't sure they'd recognize real warning signs. They're anxious precisely because they're unprepared. The person with a 72-hour plan, they're calm. They've mapped trigger conditions. They know what actions they'd take at hour 0 versus hour 24 versus hour 48. They've got strategic cash reserves and diversified holdings. When banking news appears, they evaluate it against their framework and either act or don't act. No panic, no endless scrolling trying to figure out what to do, no stress about whether they're missing something critical. This is exactly like any other insurance. You have car insurance, health insurance, homeowner's insurance. But that's our, end quote. You have not probably morecaster. You have car insurance. Nobody calls you paranoid for maintaining those policies, even though you hope you'll never need them. A banking collapse plan is the same thing risk management for a low probability but high consequence event. The cost of preparation is minimal compared to the cost of being unprepared. Think about what preparation actually requires. 1 weekend of setup. Maybe $2,000 to $5,000 in strategic cash reserves you don't touch unless there's actual crisis. Some basic supplies you'd eventually use anyway. A simple checklist of actions mapped to specific warning signs. That's it. You're not dedicating your life to preparation. You're spending a few hours on a backup plan that hopefully sits unused for years. Now compare that minimal cost to the consequence of being unprepared. Cyprus depositors lost access to 70% of their money. Greeks faced €60 daily withdrawal limits for months. Lebanese citizens watched 90% or more of their savings' real value vanish. These weren't theoretical scenarios, they happened in developed nations with modern banking systems within the last decade. You might be thinking, won't I look foolish if I prepare and nothing happens? First, nobody needs to know about your preparations. Your cash reserve, your supply stockpile, your diversified holdings, none of that requires public announcement. Second, insurance always looks unnecessary until you need it. Nobody who maintains fire insurance feels foolish just because their house didn't burn down this year. You might think, this seems extreme. Cyprus depositors probably thought so too before Thursday evening in March 2013. Greek citizens thought capital controls were extreme right up until they were implemented. Lebanese depositors trusted their modern banking system. All of them would tell you now that having a 72-hour plan would have been the most rational thing they could have done. Here's the shift I want you to internalize. Once you understand exponential cascade mechanics, how digital banking transforms slow-motion collapses into 72-hour lockouts, not preparing becomes the irrational choice. You're gambling that low-probability, high-consequence events won't affect you, with no backup plan if you're wrong. And here's the final piece. Anxiety doesn't come from awareness of risk. Anxiety comes from helplessness in the face of risk. When you understand collapse mechanics but have no plan, that knowledge creates stress because you know you're vulnerable. But when you understand the mechanics and have a plan, that knowledge creates calm because you know you're positioned to handle it. Maybe you'll never need your 72-hour plan. That's genuinely the outcome I hope happens. But if warning signs do appear Friday evening, if you see credible indicators the cascade is starting, you want to be the person who can act at hour 0 instead of the person still deciding whether to be concerned at hour 48. Build the plan now because your future self is counting on the decisions you make today. Trust me, when the warning signs appear, you'll be grateful you took this seriously.